The player who got Christie Sides fired wasn't an opponent, a rival GM, or even a journalist. It was Caitlin Clark, and she did it without saying a single negative word. The common belief is that the Indiana Fever's coach, Christie Sides, was fired on October 27, 2024, simply for not meeting expectations. The team made the playoffs for the first time since 2016, but they got bounced immediately. The official team statement was polite, thanking her for leading them through a transition period. That is the surface-level story. That is the expectation. But the reality is that Christie Sides exposed herself, and the person holding the mirror was her own rookie superstar. The real story is a death by 1,000 cuts, captured in public press conferences, leaked private texts, and a financial clock that the front office could no longer ignore. This wasn't a normal firing, it was a containment protocol. This is the expectation versus the reality. And today we are unpacking the receipts that led to one of the biggest coaching shakeups in recent WNBA history. We're going to answer the 3 key questions you should be asking. First, what player actually got Christie Sides fired? Second, how did they expose her using her own words against her? And third, why does the hiring of her replacement, Stephanie White, prove the entire case? We pulled the press conference transcripts, the post-firing interviews, and even the CBA rookie scale clauses that made this move an absolute necessity. The official story is that Christie Sides was let go as part of a normal business evaluation. The Indiana Fever's president of basketball operations, Kelly Krauskopf, released a statement on October 27th saying, "We are incredibly thankful to Coach Sides. While decisions like these are never easy, it is also imperative that we remain bold in the pursuit of our goals." This is standard corporate language for "you're fired." The media ran with the simple narrative: the Fever got the most hyped rookie in history, they only finished as the 6th seed, and they were eliminated by the Sun. Therefore, the coach was fired. It makes sense on paper. It's clean, it's simple, and it's what the team wants you to believe. But that's not what was happening. The real story, the one that forced the front office's hand, was that the coach had publicly and repeatedly lost control of the narrative, her locker room, and her own filter. The tension wasn't just about wins and losses. It was about public embarrassment and a fundamental misunderstanding of how to manage a generational star. The Fever didn't just fire a coach, they silenced a public relations problem. And that problem started way back in June. This wasn't a basketball decision, it was a crisis management decision. But to see the real crack in the foundation, you have to look at the receipts the coach wrote herself. The single most shocking receipt that sealed Christie Sides' fate didn't come from a loss. It came from a win. After a tough game in early June 2024, Sides went to the podium and publicly threw her entire team, including her rookie stars, under the bus. A reporter asked her about the team's defensive problems, and Sides, visibly frustrated, said, "I'm going to start with, you can't at this level coach effort. I felt like we were just asking them to keep playing hard. You can't play in this league if you have to coach effort." This was a tactical nuclear bomb. Coaches say this in a locked film session. They do not say it into a live microphone. It was a stunning lack of accountability, blaming the players for what was clearly a failing scheme and a grueling schedule. But that wasn't even her worst offense. Just days later, after Caitlin Clark was snubbed from the Olympic team, Sides went to the media and shared a private text message from her rookie. She told reporters the thing she said was, "Hey, coach, they woke a monster," which I thought was awesome. While it seemed supportive on the surface, this was a massive violation of trust. Caitlin Clark herself was handling the snub with public grace, saying she was excited for the girls on the team. Sides took a private moment of frustration from her player and broadcast it to the world for her own media soundbite. She made herself the main character in Caitlyn's story. These two quotes, the coach effort line and the woke a monster leak, were the real exposure. They showed the WNBA, the front office, and the other players that Sides was in over her head, breaking the two biggest rules of coaching: never show up your players in public and never, ever leak their private conversations. The firing in October was just a delayed consequence of the exposure in June. So if Christie Sides exposed herself, how did Caitlin Clark land the final blow? She did it by saying nothing at all, and then by praising someone else. This is the polite exposure that proved the entire case. After Sides was fired, the Fever moved quickly to hire Stephanie White, the former coach of the Connecticut Sun. Almost immediately, an interview with Caitlin Clark from before the firing, from October 29, 2024, went viral. In it, she was asked about Stephanie White as an opposing coach and broadcaster. Clark lit up. She said, "She's obviously called a lot of my games all throughout college. I just think she has a really great basketball mind. I think she's always been somebody that's been supportive of my game." A really great basketball mind. Compare that to how Clark always described Christie Sides. In public comments, Clark was professional but reserved, often calling Christie a kind lady or simply coach. She never, not once, used the same effusive praise for Sides' tactical or mental approach to the game. She never called her a great basketball mind. This quote, unearthed by fans on Twitter, was the accidental confession. It was Clark showing everyone the difference between a coach she tolerated and a coach she respected. The front office saw this. They saw a rookie who was desperate for high-level tactical leadership, and they saw a current coach who was busy talking about effort. The contrast was so stark, it made the firing inevitable. Clark didn't need to swing a sword. She just had to point out that the Empress had no clothes. But it wasn't just Clark. Christie Sides' coaching failures created chaos for the entire roster, and she failed to manage the one thing that was guaranteed to happen: the physical war against Caitlin Clark. This wasn't just about X's and O's, it was about protection. The most infamous moment of the season was the June 1st hip check from Chennedy Carter. It was a non-basketball play, a cheap shot. What was Sides' initial response? It was weak. She barely addressed it. It wasn't until after a day of public outrage that Sides finally posted on social media, "This is unacceptable," and said the team was sending these possessions to the league. She was reactive, not proactive. This single incident highlighted her fatal flaw. She couldn't protect her star on the court, and as we saw with the effort comments, she wouldn't protect her team at the podium. This created a vacuum. Other players, like Fever teammate Lexi Hull, had to answer for it. In an October interview with Glamour, Hull spoke about the jealousy from other teams, saying, "We've heard people and players and teams talking in their locker room about we can't let the Fever win." Hull and the rest of the team were fighting a two-front war, one against opponents who were literally admitting to targeting them, and one against their own coach's baffling public relations strategy. She was a general who blamed her soldiers for the war going badly. Now, let's talk about the final nail in the coffin. The one receipt that supersedes all others: money. Specifically, the WNBA collective bargaining agreement. The most valuable asset in professional sports is a superstar on a rookie-scale contract. The Indiana Fever have two, Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston. According to the WNBA CBA, Clark is the #1 pick, made just over $76,000 in 2024. Aaliyah Boston, in her second year, made just over $78,000. This is the golden window. This is the only time a franchise can build a super team using the cap space saved on their stars to sign elite veterans. The Indiana front office watched Christie Sides take this golden 2-year window and waste half of it. She was given 2 #1 picks, the keys to the franchise, and a global media spotlight. And in return, she delivered a 6th seed exit and a series of viral negative press conferences. She wasn't just losing games, she was depreciating the team's most valuable asset, that limited 4-year rookie contract window. The decision to fire her despite making the playoffs was a cold, hard financial calculation. They could not afford to waste 2025. They could not risk another year of coach effort. The exposure wasn't just about trust, it was about the bottom line. Firing Sides and paying her remaining 2 years on her contract was cheaper than letting her cost them another year of Clark and Boston's rookie deals. So let's recap. The reality is that Christie Sides was fired because she exposed herself as a manager who couldn't be trusted. She was exposed by her own public quotes, like "you can't coach effort." She was exposed by her violation of trust, leaking Caitlin Clark's "woke a monster" text. She was exposed by Clark herself, whose glowing praise for another coach's great basketball mind revealed everything she really thought. And finally, she was exposed by the CBA, which put a timer on her job the moment she proved she couldn't maximize the single greatest financial advantage in the league. The most important takeaway is this. In the modern WNBA, especially in the Caitlin Clark era, the job of a head coach is no longer just X's and O's. It's media management, it's public relations, and it's asset protection. Christie Sides failed on all 3 fronts. The player who got her fired was, in the end, Caitlin Clark, who simply demanded a level of competence that Sides couldn't provide. To see how general managers and team presidents really handle these behind-the-scenes power struggles, you need to understand their playbook. The next logical step is to check out our Locker Room Confidential playlist, which breaks down the biggest power moves in sports history.